We had some questions about a post that we put on both Instagram and Facebook over the last week that was about explosive repeats as a form of conditioning for Taekwondo sparring specifically. So the kind of questions that were asked were about the exercise selection, the duration of the rounds, any reason for the duration of the rounds, the time of work, the time of rest, etc. So maybe if we just spend a moment and think about the logic of why we use this as a conditioning method for ITF Taekwondo. So explosive repeats, the idea is to use techniques that are well learned, nothing that is new or is still being refined or practiced. They're techniques that are well learned and can be performed at a high intensity, so they can be repeated quickly without too much error. That's really necessary because we don't want to slow down the repetitions at all. We want to be able to perform continuously. As a second qualifying criteria, the technique should be something that you might yourself use as a sparring combination. So it could be something that you've been training over a period of time. You've got it to a relatively refined stage. You feel good with it, and you want to. We're going to use it at a higher level of intensity. The modelling of the exercise follows very similarly to a kind of an overlap between high intensity interval training and sprint interval training. So that is to say that you're going to have a period of relatively high intensity work at a maximal or just sub-maximal level of effort, followed by a period of rest, and there will be a number of intervals of work and rest. That allows for a session that is relatively short in duration, but that has a metabolic response and stimulus that's equivalent to a much longer effort of moderate intensity continuous training. So we do that because class time is limited. We want to have a profound impact in a shorter period of time if possible. And we can control what's happening in the class environment. We can't really control what's happening outside of the class environment. It also kind of obeys the principle of specificity, so we're using Taekwondo techniques to condition people for Taekwondo sparring. So for us, that's preferable to having a person run or swim or row in order to build their Taekwondo-specific conditioning. When we design the rounds, we base it around the idea that for someone to be a champion at a competitive level in an international event, typically they'll have to win somewhere from 3 to 5 matches, each match being two 2-minute rounds with a minute rest between those rounds, and then anything from 5 up to 30 minutes rest in between the matches. So when we start off using intervals first, we will usually work with something in the region of 8 seconds of work to 12 seconds of rest for 6 intervals. So that amounts to 2 minutes. The rest is 1.5 times the work as far as the intervals go. But then at the end of the 2-minute round, your 6 intervals, you're going to have 2 minutes to 2 minutes 30 seconds of rest while your partner is working. So the recovery is quite complete in between intervals. We would progress that then towards 9 seconds of work, 11 seconds of rest, 10 and 10, 11 and 9, and so on. We would only very occasionally go up to a work to rest ratio that's as high as 12 seconds work to 8 seconds rest, because once you get past the 10 second work to 10 second rest, you're so depleted you're not putting out that high intensity anymore in the later rounds, and that's done as a form of really psychological training and not so much for the physiological benefit anymore. We would also mix between alternating 2-minute rounds. So I go for 2 minutes, you go for 2 minutes, and occasionally following the pattern that we would have in competition, where I work for 2 minutes, take 1 minute rest, I work for 2 minutes again, and then my partner goes, so they will be getting about a 5-minute rest in between your work intervals. And then finally we would occasionally go to 9 rounds. So 9 rounds brings us up to 2 minutes plus 1 minute of additional time added right on top of that, which is what happens when there's a draw. Again, we do that without usually telling the athletes who are performing. So you'll finish your 2-minute round and then I'll just say, okay, let's go for 3 more. And that tends to be how it works out when a draw happens. So there's always the debate in terms of physical fitness of how much of it is limited by the muscle, the energy supply, the accumulation of lactate or other byproducts in the muscle, or any other physiological source of fatigue, versus how much is determined by perception of effort versus expected effort and the fatigue that comes out of that. So we think it's just as important to condition the mind to experiencing unexpected fatigue, so that when that then happens in a more competitive situation, it's not unfamiliar. I think that gives a basic idea as to what the logic is for the exercises that we use, and the methodology that we're following when we use them. It's nothing new. It's certainly something that's been in use for at least 100 years, and we're really drawing on work that's been done in everything from cross-country skiing to 5K running, to the type of training that people who run sub 1 minute miles would do, and we're just applying it within our sport with specific exercises.